Hi you guys, welcome to today's video. Today we are going to talk about a case that took place in the United Kingdom. It is a tragic tale of woe, murder, most foul, with a dose of charismatic Christianity. We will be talking about something that transpired in a decades-long fear of ritual satanic worship that had begun to wash over Western culture. Today we will talk about the Ossett Exorcist Murder. Before we jump into this wild case, let's get our housekeeping out of the way. First, down below in the comments section, you will find a pinned comment from me listing 3 cases that I am interested in covering, and I need your help to choose, so please vote down below. Second and final request, please, if you are enjoying the content that I have created or what you listen to today, please give the video a like and subscribe to my channel. Okay, that concludes our housekeeping requests, so let's jump into this tale of exorcism. In 1974, England newspaper headlines read, "Exorcism turned loving husband into killer, a true case of possession. The Ossett Exorcist Murder." So, who is this loving husband turned killer? That was a 31-year-old named Michael Taylor. He was born at the tail end of the Second World War in 1944, and he was raised in the English market town of Ossett in Wakefield, West Yorkshire. Though Ossett was considered very much a Christian town, the Taylor family was not overly religious and didn't really find the time to settle in and attend local churches. Neighbors of the Taylor family described them as mild-mannered and full of kindness despite their unwillingness for a religious life. Michael started a career as a full-time butcher and married the love of his life, Christine. By the early 1970s, this couple had 5 children and were living in a small rustic house in the town they had both grown up in with their dog. Michael had hurt his back in an accident that forced him to leave the butcher's job, and after that point he had really struggled to find full-time employment afterwards. This transition in his life would cause him to suffer bouts of depression, which translated outwardly in a way of becoming very withdrawn from the community and significantly was retreating from society, and she thought that the only way that this depression in his life could be cured was through religion. Because of that, Barbara would introduce him to a church group called the Galber Christian Fellowship. Again, despite Michael not really being so much into religion and not attending church regularly. However, he would go and attend the first group meeting with his wife, Christine, and both ended up being impressed with this group's outlook on life and their take on religion. This group was run by a woman by the name of Marie Robinson. Her soft-spoken form of old-time religion really appealed to Michael, and at least that is what everybody thought in the beginning. Over a period of time, Michael's depression began to improve, and this was after attending a handful of group meetings. His friends and members of the church believed that his depression had improved purely on the basis of spiritual intervention and by the hand of God himself. While Michael attended these church meetings, he became quite enthralled with Marie Robinson, who was only 20 years old at the time. She was considered a lay preacher, which is a religious servant who is not a formally ordained cleric, and just helps the church in the promotion and function of its beliefs. He would pretty quickly fall deeply into Marie's teachings, and he would attend meetings where group members were exorcised and demons were cast out with what they called, quote, the power of God. Within a few months, Michael's friendship with Marie would escalate to the next level, and things were no longer just on a friendly level. Marie's soft-spoken leadership of the group was just too much for Michael to ignore, and he spent as much time with Marie as he could. These group meetings soon enough would turn into private meetings between Marie and Michael. They would sit across from each other and make the sign of the cross over and over, sometimes for 8+ hours. He would supposedly speak in tongues, believing that this would quiet the dark and evil power of the moon, which was the opposite to the light and goodness of the sun. Now, to the other members of the prayer group, it was very clear that Michael had fallen head over heels in love with Marie. His time away at church and these private prayer meetings were very much being noticed in his home life. I mean, how could you not notice that? When Michael was home and obviously away from Marie, he would become very withdrawn, slipping into deep depressions. He had become sullen and argumentative and would lash out at his wife and children, and before all of this, Michael was a very loving and caring husband and father. But once he started spending all of church. They were simply using their positions to empower themselves. Now, as some time went on and Christine's suspicions grew that something was going on with Marie and that this prayer group wasn't really doing him any favors, she decides to attend another meeting because Michael and Christine had originally attended the first meeting together, but Christine did not attend nearly as many as Michael. But she would go to the next prayer meeting and openly confronted Michael about his engagements with Marie. This prayer meeting would take place in Michael and Christine's home. It sounds like they would rotate where they would have these prayer meetings, and so I think that may have been why Christine felt more comfortable with this confrontation level being in the comfort of her own home. When all of this unfolded, something broke inside of Michael. Interestingly, instead of addressing his wife, he stood up and began to attack Marie both verbally and physically. He was shouting at her in tongues when the rest of the congregation had to restrain him. I just want to give a little bit of background. I realized that not everybody listening may know what speaking in tongues means. This is a practice in religion in which people utter words or speech-like sounds, often thought by believers to be languages unknown to the speaker. It is considered a divine language. It is considered a gift and a phenomenon that occurs when a person experiencing religious ecstasy or a trance utters incomprehensible sounds that they believe are a language spoken through them as a vessel by a god or a deity. So that is what Michael breaks out into in this moment. Marie would later be quoted saying, "I suddenly glanced at Mike and his whole features changed. He looked almost bestial. He kept looking at me and there was a really wild look in his eyes. I started screaming at him out of fear. I started speaking in tongues. Mike also screamed at me in tongues. I was on the verge of death and I seemed to come to my senses. I knew that only the name of Jesus would save me, and I just started saying over and over again, Jesus." When Christine heard me calling on the name of Jesus, she started saying it too. And I believe firmly that I was only by calling on his name that I was not killed. End quote. Michael would claim that he had no memory of this happening. At the next meeting, Michael would receive full absolution from Marie, but still his outburst had most definitely not gone unrecognized. Of course, people were whispering about this, and none of it was good. The people of his congregation exorcism. Michael began thrashing, convulsing, and spitting, and had to be tied to the floor of the church, which I feel like if you've ever watched any exorcist-style movie, that's a pretty solid description of what you see. A crucifix was jammed into his mouth, and he was completely soaked with holy water. At 8 a.m. the following morning of October 6th, the priests could not continue. They were exhausted, and by their admission had cast out more than 40 demons from Michael. The priests said the exorcism would have to be finished at a later date and advised Michael not to worry, saying they had only left but 3 demons to be exorcised, and they identified those 3 demons as murder, madness, and violence. What a solid 3 demons to leave behind. Once this portion of the exorcism had come to a finish, Michael and Christine were told to go home and prepare for part 2 of the exorcism. At 9:45, just an hour and 45 minutes after part 1 of the exorcism, police patrolling the area where Michael and Christine lived discovered a gruesome sight. Michael was ambling along the street, completely naked and covered head to toe in blood, screaming about the demons within him and Satan himself. The officer that had found Michael rushed to his home, only to find more police officers were already there. Their neighbors had heard noises and had contacted the police. The officer that had found Michael approached the house but was waved off by an exiting criminal inspector who said, quote, "You don't want to see this one, son. I have seen nothing like it before, and I've seen a few. It's the wife. She's got no..." He's ripped at her son. "It's a right mess in there. There's not much of her left. You don't want to see it." End quote. Now, upon entering the house, officers were met with what some would later call the worst crime scene they have ever worked. Michael had brutally attacked Christine, removing her eyes and tongue before ripping her face off of her skull. He then strangled the family dog, and after the dog was dead, he ripped out its eyes and tore it limb from limb, throwing them around the house. And the house was covered from wall to ceiling in blood. While all of this had been found, Michael had been rushed to a nearby hospital for treatment. He would be arrested in the hospital, and he claimed that the evil inside of Christine had been destroyed. He was quoted saying, "Released. I am released. It is done. The evil in her has been destroyed." So, what actually happened was Michael Taylor neurotic, end quote. Retired police constable Ian Walker described the tragic story of Michael Taylor and said, quote, "Of all the incidents in which I was involved in 38 years of police work, nothing affected me like this one. The stupidity and futility of it all, the complete and utter waste of life, destruction of a family, not to mention the death and other traumas, are far beyond anything else I have ever come across." End quote. In an unprecedented trial, Michael would be acquitted on the grounds of insanity. A defense psychologist expressed the theory that Michael's actions were a direct result of the intense psychological torment he had suffered at the exorcism, and said that the priests were the ones to be blamed. The priests would be brought in to testify, and they would share that they had expelled all but 3 of the demons, and it was one of the 3 demons that had possessed Michael and used his body to kill Christine. Though there was no way to prove in a trial that Michael had been possessed by a demon, he was ultimately found not guilty by reason of insanity. Michael would be sent to the infamous Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital for 2 years before being transferred to a lower security facility for an additional 2 years. He would be released just 4 years after brutally murdering his wife and the family dog. None of the members of the church faced any charges in the death of Christine Taylor. And interestingly enough, the man in charge of the exorcism, which was Reverend Peter Vincent, even got a promotion the following year. The exorcism of Michael Taylor raised many public questions that were never answered, including why the priests in charge of the exorcism had never been charged with psychological damage, or why Michael would be released only 4 years later. Whether he was possessed, psychologically tortured, mentally unstable, or just a cold-blooded killer depends on one's own beliefs of the existence of the otherworldly and that which can inhabit a human body and mind. In 2005, Michael would be arrested for touching a teenage girl and was admitted to psychiatric care. And interestingly enough, upon admission to this facility, he was exhibiting the same symptoms as he had showed in the hours before he had murdered Christine. This has led many people to suspect that perhaps a demon remains within him still. Just an interesting fact, if any of this sounds familiar to you, this case was mentioned in the 2021 film The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, which was based on the 1981 trial of American murderer Hahn Johnson, who had claimed he was possessed by a demon. The case was investigated by demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren, who believed that Hahn was indeed possessed. Hahn was ultimately convicted of manslaughter and spent 5 years in prison, but much like Michael Taylor, demonic possession possession was never proven. Some interesting facts that I learned while going about this case is that Canon 1172 of the Code of Canon Law states that no priest can legitimately perform exorcisms unless he has obtained express permissions from the local bishop. Since 2017, exorcism in the United Kingdom, France, Italy, and the United States have been on the increase. And the craziest one to me is that the Vatican holds annual exorcism courses and trains around 250 priests a year in the practice. That concludes the Ossett Exorcist Murder case surrounding Michael Taylor. Again, you guys, I'm just gonna say this every time I cover a case like this. I am forever fascinated by cases that have to do with religion and demonic spirits, and it is just fascinating to me. And I'll be honest, I don't know what I believe when it comes to the spiritual world of demons and whatnot. I really don't know what I believe with that, but regardless of my belief on that, I do believe that Michael should be viewed as a killer and should have done much more time than 4 years. I understand potentially the, reason of insanity viewing on him, but if you are deemed to be unfit or insane, you should not be able to walk free after 4 years. So there are some major disconnects on that.